And what we have done today is just a minute. Is basically to talk about only a clinical approach. That is, what we are trying to do here is as much as that is required for you in the exam. So in the exam, you get a case and you're supposed to examine, take a history, examine, and make a diagnosis. So this little PowerPoint, it's a very short one, will just shed some light on how to approach a case of a suspected bone tumor. So if you get a case of a bone tumor, two natural questions come to you. You know, if you suspect, if you see a case, there will be two questions that is in your mind. Is my patient having a suffering from a bone tumor? And the second is, if it is true, what is the tumor? What is the likely tumor? So before we embark on this journey of trying to diagnose tumors, it's good to have a little grounding in theoretical knowledge. And we know that a primary bone tumor is a cancer that starts directly from the bone, a primary malignancy, contrast from a secondary bone tumor or a metastasis, which is actually a spread from some other tumor. And we know that the secondaries are by far very, very common, by far very, very common. Yeah, so by far very, very common, and so common to the extent that you should always think of a metastasis or a secondary far more often than you think of a primary. So if you have 10 cases, 7 may be a metastasis and 3 may be a myeloma, and only after that can you even dare to think of a primary. Now, having said that, in your postgraduate exam, it's very unlikely you're going to get a CA breast with secondaries. You're going to get most likely a primary bone tumor to examine, a benign or a malignant primary bone tumor to examine. So it'll do you good so that you can understand and make a diagnosis for these cases. So since we know that primary bone tumors are likely to come, it is good to know the name of some bone tumors. And what really helps you is the WHO classification of bone tumors. This is a very simple, organized, and a very thoughtful way of dealing with bone tumors, depending on their cell of origin or the cell of what tissue they throw up. So you can have bone forming, cartilage forming, fibrous, and a small round cell origin. You have benign and malignant varieties. So an osteosarc is a malignant bone forming tumor, just like a chondrosarcoma is a malignant cartilage forming tumor. Similarly, there may be many benign tumors, enchondromas, osteochondromas, non-ossifying fibromas. Each of this have a characteristic presentation. Each of this have something special about itself. Okay, so similarly, if you continue in the classification, you have giant cells, giant cell tumor. A malignant giant cell tumor is a rare variety. Plus, you have what we call co-travelers in the bone. That is the fat, the nerve, the muscle, and unknown origin. These can also, on a bad day, form tumors. So if you know this, the good thing is you will know some names. And it's good to know some names. Sometimes what happens, the place where you train does not deal with bone tumors, and you are totally out of sorts when you see a case. So if you know this classification, at least you can do some guesswork and give the name to a tumor. So the first question, is my patient suffering from a bone tumor? That is based on your history. Now, this is a concept that all of you use in your daily clinical practice, and you must know about is what we call a surgical sieve. A surgical sieve. So patients come in different ways. They come in with different conditions. And each question that you ask in the history kind of filters the other diagnosis. So if I ask, was the swelling present at birth? And somebody says, no, it was not present at birth. So automatically what you're doing, you're knocking off the congenital from the list of differential diagnosis. Was there fever, swelling, tenderness, and pus discharge? So when somebody says no, then you know it's probably not a infective process. So this is the thought process that goes in everybody's mind when they see a patient who presents to the OPD or the casualties. So you have to sieve this, you have to filter this, and you have a patient who has a typically neoplastic symptoms. And what are these neoplastic symptoms? Pain. Pain is one of the predominant neoplastic symptoms. Pain, which can be very severe, that disturbs the patient at night, that does not allow the patient to sleep at night. These are all signs of, these are sinister signs. They are signs of a malignant tumor. Pain can follow a swelling also. So the swelling is the most obvious sign and symptom of a tumor. It could be associated with pain. In fact, pain sometimes might precede, might come before the swelling, just like in a malignant tumor. Or you might first get a swelling and later slowly it turns painful, which is more pointing towards a benign swelling. The other symptom that you see is a general ill health, because especially in a malignant disease, the patient's metabolism is not best, his nutrition is not best. So the patient complains of a general ill health. You might have pressure symptoms. Either the tumor is so big that it is causing mechanical problems, or it has infiltrated a neurovascular bundle and you're getting a foot drop, you're getting a radial nerve palsy, you're getting a vascular kind of pain, you're getting radiating pain down the arm because of a swelling in the axilla. And obviously, because of pain, swelling, and other pressure symptoms, these patients are not very mobile. They may also present with pathological fractures. So all these put together or individually will make you think of bone tumors. Here are some tumors, some swellings that you right away see, swellings on the scapula and other parts of the body. So here, immediately it strikes you that probably I'm dealing with a tumorous process. My diagnosis should point towards a tumor. This is an unusual presentation. This patient presenting with foot drop. And actually later when you search it, you find that there is a tumor which is the root cause of the foot drop. So this patient has actually presented with pressure symptoms. So the question you have to answer in your clinical examination is, like you saw the patient with the scapular swelling. This could be a soft tissue swelling. It could be a muscular swelling. The question we want to know is whether the swelling is arising from bone. Isn't it? What in clinical parlance we call the plane of the swelling. And there are 2 points that really help you. One is most bony tumors are hard. This is not true for everything, but most of them are hard and they are immobile. They are fixed to the bone. That reasonably well gives you where the swelling is arising from. So if it is arising from a bone, obviously it will be a bone tumor and not a soft tissue tumor. This is a small differentiation point, which was in the exam. A lot of people say that there is a swelling in the bone when actually the bone is expanded. Circumferentially, the bone has become big. And a postgraduate says that there is a swelling arising from bone. This is typically not, let's say, correct English, at least correct presentation skills. When in the first picture on the left, this is a swelling arising from bone. Whereas in this humerus upper arm swelling, you will say that the upper end of the arm and the proximal humerus region is expanded. So it will certainly give you a difference that whether you're dealing with a circumferential mass or a side mass, a mass that arises from the side. So then the question you answer is this swelling benign or malignant? And you go in order, you go from the history. If it is rapidly growing, it points towards benign. If it has been being static for many months and years, it's probably, if it's rapidly growing, it's malignant. If it's static, probably it's benign. A static swelling now suddenly starts growing fast. That means it's a benign on which a malignant change has occurred. The presence of metastasis almost always means that the tumor cannot be benign. That means we are dealing with a metastasis. Clinical examination sometimes gives you a clue. The presence of dilated veins, a fungating tumor, local warmth, the presence of a soft tissue. Instead of a hard, you get a variegated palpation. So presence of a soft tissue mass and variegated consistency will tell you that this is probably malignant. Once in an exam, I asked why this patient is suffering from a malignant tumor. They said the patient has alopecia and loss of hair. Somebody has given in chemotherapy. It's common sense that they will not give it for benign. So sometimes in a general examination, if you say that there is loss of hair and loss of eyebrows, which is consequent to a sequelae of chemotherapy, you know that you're dealing with a benign tumor, a malignant tumor, sorry. It is also good to remember that the benign and malignant are actually two different compartments. They don't mix. So when you make a clinical diagnosis of, I think this is a benign tumor, it is an osteochondroma, but a probable osteosarcoma, that is a malignant. You can't do that. You have to compartmentalize yourself, make a choice, choose one side, choose benign or malignant, and then give a differential diagnosis. Sometimes you have some tumors which are borderline. They have features of benignity. So you find dilated veins, a lot of warmth, there's a soft. So you are confused now whether this is benign or that is on the boundary wall. They sit on the wall. They sit on the fence. Sometimes it is diagnosis of infection. Sometimes it could be heterotrophic ossifications. These also, it is good to remember that they can produce tumor or tumor-like symptoms. So what are these benign aggressive tumors? The two commonest that occur are the giant cell and the aneurysmal bone system. So you can have a very aggressive giant cell tumor, for all practical purpose will look like a malignancy. But actually it's a benign giant cell tumor. It's an aggressive variety. The same is true of a aneurysmal bone cyst. The other three are reasonably rare. So you have now taken a call whether it is benign or malignant. So now if it's, you should be able to do a good clinical examination and tell us whether it is epiphyseal. Epiphyseal means it is to be related with a joint. So any epiphyseal swelling may typically cause restriction of movements due to the location of the tumor. Whether it is in the shaft of the bone, which means it's diaphyseal. If it is somewhere in between, it is metaphyseal. So clinically, you make a commitment whether it is epiphyseal, metaphyseal, or diaphyseal. Sometimes it could be both together. You can have a epiphysio-metaphyseal swelling. It's quite possible, or a diaphysio-metaphyseal swelling. So when you do this, and you now have found out where it is arising from, whether it is benign or whether it is malignant, then you can actually take a guess of whether what this tumor is. And based on its these 3 points, you get a clue. What is the age of the patient? Where is the tumor located? Whether it is benign or malignant. All these 3 points you will get it in your clinical examination, history and clinical examination. So this is a rough way to remember. The first decade, the malignant tumor is typically a Ewing sarcoma. The second is osteosarc. The third to fifth decade is the giant cell tumor. And any patient who's above 40, the first thought should go for a metastasis. Now, where is the tumor located? Is it in a flat bone? Is it in a scapula or pelvis? Certain tumors have a predilection for the bone. For example, a chondrosarcoma typically would occur in the scapula or the pelvis. These are common sites. Other bones, other long bones, you can get giant cell tumors or osteosarcomas, which are more common in long bones. They're not seen in flat bones. Then depending on epiphyseal and metaphyseal or diaphyseal, you have a differential diagnosis of tumors. Why I have cut medullary canal and cortex is because this topic is limited to clinical examination. You will not be able to really make out whether the tumor is arising from the medullary canal or the cortex, though a medullary canal tumor is typically circumferential and a cortical tumor may be eccentric. Okay. So this is one way to remember it, depending on locations. Now that little CB stands for chondroblastoma. You can look at the diagram on the right, which tells you chondroblastoma and giant cell tumors are typically epiphyseal tumors. if the physeal plate, that little black, I'm not able to use a pointer here, the typical black right angle mark actually represents the physis. So the physis is open, and if it's an epiphyseal tumor, you're actually dealing with a chondroblastoma. If the physis is closed, it is a giant cell tumor. Diaphyseal tumors are remembered by this small little code, which is EFAHL, which is Ewing sarcoma, fibrous lesions of bone, fibrous dysplasias and all that. Adamantinoma, another rare tumor. H is histiocytosis. L is lymphomas and leukemias of bone tend to produce diaphyseal lesion. The rest of the tumors are all metaphyseal. So this is an easy way to remember. Location of the tumor. So these are some good ways of good diagnosis you can have. That, sorry. Yeah, good diagnosis you can have. This, if the examiner hears a sentence like this, it means you have done a good examination and you know what you're talking. So these are typical diagnoses you will tell at the end of a clinical case. This is my patient is a 14-year-old boy with a malignant bone tumor arising from the right femoral distal metaphysis. This is probably an osteosarcoma. So this is clinically what we expect from you. Another one, 11-year-old with a benign tumor arising from the medial aspect of the left tibia upper metaphysis, probably a osteochondroma. A 26-year-old with a benign epiphyseal tumor arising from the distal femur, probably a giant cell. These are all examples of good diagnosis in your clinical examination when you get a case. So remember, there'll be 5 things. You want to know that it is a tumor. You want to know that it arises from the bone. You must know whether it's benign or malignant. You must also know the location of the tumor and a differential diagnosis. So these are the 5 things we are looking for in your clinical diagnosis of a bone tumor. Okay, so this is all about clinical diagnosis alone. So remember the surgical sieve. The surgical sieve is simply the questions you ask to the patient by which you are to eliminate other causes of the disease. Use it every day. Use it every patient you meet. You ask a few, all of you are doing it every day. But remember that it is critical for the starting point of a diagnosis. Listen and examine to the patient before offering a diagnosis. Why I have put this point is, very often you see a child and you see a swelling in the femur and say osteosarcoma. I've heard this before, and later you find out it is a chronic osteomyelitis with thickening and all. So take your time, listen to the history. There may be exacerbations and remissions. There may be history of prolonged antibiotic therapy, which all gives you a clue that it is not a malignant process or not a tumor. So never forget to examine and listen to the patient before offering a diagnosis. Good to have some names, like we said before, know from names. So sometimes we ask, yes, what is your diagnosis? It's probably so-and-so. It could be a osteosarcoma. Is there a differential? Immediately what you say is the next name that comes into your mind is chondrosarcoma. So you say my next differential is a chondrosarcoma. An osteosarcoma and a chondrosarcoma can never be in the same differential because they come at different age groups, they come at different presentations. So it is good. You would say probably it's a fibrosarcoma, which is more likely than an osteosarcoma. So it's good to know the name of few tumors. Again, repeating my point, when you make a compartment of benign, stay inside. Or when you say it's a malignant tumor, don't benign and say it is also can be an osteochondroma. That is a fatal thing to say. That's not a good thing to say. Okay. Remember, clinical diagnosis is one step in the ultimate diagnosis. So there's no harm in being wrong. In fact, people who get the right diagnosis do all sorts of investigations from CT, MRIs, biopsies, and histopathological reports before you can even say what exactly the tumor is. So if you're off the mark in the differential, it doesn't matter. But you should have identified whether it is a benign or a malignant process. Isn't it? That's what we said. Even when the experienced radiologists and pathologists are unsure of their diagnosis, there's absolutely no harm in you getting it a little off center. Okay. So this is how you form a clinical diagnosis for a bone tumor. Okay. I think what I'll do is, so I had actually stopped there and it was quite small. So I just added a little bit on the management and a few more points, and it's more theoretical, and there will be a lot of repetition also. Okay. So remember, we talked about this, whether it's benign or malignant and what is its clinical diagnosis. So when you get a tumor, you must also do, these are management principles. You must be able to stage the tumor. You must be able to stage the tumor locally and systemically. Locally means typically in a surgical setup, we call it locally, regionally, and systemically. But in bone tumors, since there's very little lymph node spread, we say whether it is localized or systemically spread. Localized means whether it is inside one compartment or it has broken through and gone to another compartment. That are two types of local staging. Systemic means it has got metastatic diagnosis and have a appropriate treatment. So this is the general protocol of management of a tumor. And we have already spoken about this and we are just repeating ourselves. Ewing sarcoma, the red ones are the malignant ones. The simple bone cyst. This little diagram will tell you how age influences the diagnosis. So when you're 40 or 50, then metastasis become far more common. If you're a teenager, a college-going student, and it's a malignancy, you're more likely that it is a osteosarcoma. The fibrosarcomas come sometimes a little later, the 20s and 30s. So it is good to know the individual age presentation of each tumor. We have already talked about this. So when you take an X-ray, this is just another point because sometimes it is asked in the exam on an X-ray. William Enikin has done lots of work on musculoskeletal oncology. And for diagnosis on an X-ray, he had framed these 4 questions. Where is the tumor located? What is the tumor doing to bone? What is the bone doing to tumor? And what does the inside, what does the matrix of the tumor look like? So these are sometimes called Enikin's 4 questions. And if you answer these questions, then radiologically you get a clue what type of tumor are you dealing with. Again, we have talked about this extensively in the previous presentation. Is it a flat bone, scapula pelvis? Is it a long bone? If it is a long bone, is it in the epiphysis, metaphysis, diaphysis? Is it epimetaphyseal or metaphysio-diaphyseal? Within the bone, is it located in the center, in the medulla? Is it located in the cortex? Or is it towards one side? Is it in the center or is it eccentric to one side of the bone? And we'll explain this by examples. This is again the same slide to remind you that a epiphyseal tumor typically is a chondroblastoma and a giant cell tumor. In a open physis, it is likely to be a chondroblastoma. When the physis is closed, it is likely to be a giant cell tumor. And the code we said was EFAHL, which tells you about diaphyseal tumors. The rest are all metaphyseal. So that's the location in bone. So this is one example. Again, I don't have a pointer. I'm really sorry. I can't get the pointer working. So this is an example of a central location. If you see the picture on your left, this is a central location. That is, it is within the bone. Both you can see the lateral and medial ends of the tibia are normal, only in the center. Central location, epiphyseal, thank you, sir. Epiphyseal in location. Important point to note here is the physis is open. And we remember, we have said again and again, epiphyseal swelling, when the physis is open, most probably a chondroblastoma. It's also called Codman's tumor. So this is epiphyseal. Now, the picture on the right is also an epiphyseal swelling. It is abutting the joint. It is epiphyseal. But there are a few differences. One, epiphyseal, metaphyseal swelling. It is expansile. It is opened up. It's ballooned up the bone. The physis is closed. So this is likely to be a giant cell. I'm just going by location here. I'm not telling about the other thing, just location. Epiphyseal tumor, physeal closed, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, probably we are dealing with a giant cell tumor. So the next question is, what is the tumor doing to bone? So what can tumor do to bone? It can expand the bone, what you saw previously. The picture on the right, a tumor is called expansile if it crosses the normal anatomical boundaries of the bone. So this tumor is definitely expansile. It has pushed out radially. So it is an expansile tumor. Cortical erosion is a lytic lesion. It can erode the cortex. Again, in this tumor, you can see that you can't see the radial cortex of the distal radius. It is eaten away. Cortical erosion. What type of destruction is the tumor causing? Is the tumor causing a fracture? And what is the zone of transition? So these are the 5 things that come under the question, what is the tumor doing to bone? So that is a non-expansile tumor, the one on the left. Everything is occurring within the dimensions of the bone. The bone is not, blown out. Now see the diagram on the right of the fibula. There, definitely, it has spilled over the lateral margins of the bone. So the one on the left is a non-expansile lytic lesion. The one on the right is a expansional lytic lesion of the distal fibula. So this is the difference between expansile and non-expansile. Okay. Typically, expansile tumors are aneurysmal bone cysts and giant cell tumors. This is another expansile tumor which has eroded the cortex. You can see that the radial margin of the radius is gone. Similarly, the articular margin of the radius is also hardly visible. So this is cortical erosion. So you say the radial aspect of the epiphyseal and metaphyseal part of the distal radius is eroded. That is where the original cortex is. That's totally gone. That is eroded and expansile. So again, we come to what is called patterns of destruction. This is the other question we are asking. Now, patterns of destruction very picturesquely have been described into 3 types. A geographic lesion, a moth-eaten lesion, and a permeative lesion. In a geographic lesion, it's like the atlas, it's like the globe, one big continent inside the bone. So there is a huge lytic lesion in this picture that you see on your left of the proximal femur. It's a fibrous dysplasia actually. So it is producing a uniformly large lesion which is lytic. So a geographic is a large lesion, and it is typically a more benign kind of a process than the other 2. You can see the arrow down which shows increasing malignant potential. So the permeative is the most malignant pattern. Now the second part, which is called moth-eaten, it's as if there are big holes in the bone, lytic lesions. So if you look at the distal radius, you can see that there are holes of different dimensions. They're quite big. You can see big lytic lesions. Whereas in the last one, there may be 1 or 2 big lytic lesions, but you have to look very carefully. You look at a close-up view and you find that there are multiple small holes in especially that subtrochanteric region. If you watch carefully, multiple small holes. Compare them to the holes with the moth-eaten, which are larger. This is called a permeative. A permeative is a highly malignant process. Osteosarcomas, secondary destructions. Okay, geographic, moth-eaten, permeative. Now you can see as you come close, you can see in the subtrochanter there's obviously a fracture. Just above that fracture, if you are smart enough or you've got good imagination, you can see small holes there. That's the permeative destruction of a highly malignant tumor. Yeah, that's another close-up for you to see. You can see just adjacent to the calcarea, I'm sure you can notice small holes. Yeah, right? Exactly. The other thing you can present is a fracture. So a fracture can occur in they're typically more common in a benign process simply because malignancy has so much pain that the patient doesn't move around. So they're more common. So a cystic lesion, a simple bone cyst, unicameral bone cyst, these are likely to have fractures. This is an example of a permeative destruction. You can see small holes there above the fracture. Okay. So this is what the tumor has done to bone. It has weakened it so much that a fracture has occurred. So that is about fracture. The next is zone of transition. So if a zone of transition means it is the boundary, it is the border between the normal and the abnormal tissue. So if you have a narrow border, that means if I take a pen and I'm able to trace the tumor well, then it's a benign tumor. A wide zone of transition is a bad sign and is indicative of a malignancy. Now, if I take a pen and I start tracing the borders of the tumor of this proximal tibia, you will find that I can draw a line. I can outline the tumor. I can outline the exactly. See, that's beautifully put. So everything on the right of this line is the tumor. Everything on the left of this line is normal. This is a narrow zone of transition, benign, good prognosis. Here, the other one, you have absolutely no clue where the tumor is starting, where the normal bone is ending. Is it just above the calcification, or is it where it is marked? Is that the end of the tumor? So we are not sure where the tumor is extending. Whether there are two ossified lesions in the diaphyseal metaphyseal angle. Is that the tumor or is that normal? We don't know. So that is a wide zone of transition and indicative of a malignant process. Okay. Now that was what the tumor was doing to the bone. Now what does the bone do to the tumor? The bone throws a periosteal reaction around the bone. The tumor, I'm sorry, the bone throws a periosteal reaction from the bone. The periosteal reaction can take different forms. All these, the Codman's triangle, the sunburst appearance, and onion scaling are essentially periosteal reactions. In a benign tumor, if you have a rim around the tumor, if it is sclerotic, if you notice the picture on the left of the proximal tibia, you can see a band of sclerosis around the lytic and the normal bone. So sclerosis is good. There is time for the body to try to build a wall around the tumor. Okay. If there is no rim of sclerosis, that means it is a fast growing and a malignancy. So here is an example of a periosteal reaction. The yellow arrow is the famous Codman's triangle, isn't it? The lifting of the periosteum by a rapidly growing tumor, by a fast tumor that is pulling. That is the Codman's triangle. Now you take the blue arrow. There is a periosteal reaction here also. But this is thick and dense. So this is a benign periosteal reaction. It is a benign periosteal. Maybe there is a small osteodosteoma there, which you can't see the nidus, or it is a subperiosteal hematoma, which has calcium. But these are broad, thick periosteal reaction, benign. Thin periosteal reaction, malignant. So this is one example. Solid, the white is representing the periosteal reaction. A solid is benign. Lamellar means the tumor is growing, taking a break, again growing, again taking a break. Typically occurs in very malignant tumors which outlive their blood supply. So they grow so fast that the blood supply to the tumor stops and you get necrosis. Lamellar, spiculated. Lamellar is typically described in an Ewing's. Spiculated in an osteosarcoma. Codman's is the soft tissue mass destroys the spiculated and leaves only the edges. So you get a Codman's triangle. Again, very aggressive, very quickly growing tumor. Now the other question, the fourth question which Anikin asks is, what is inside? What is a matrix? What is inside the tumoral tissue? Either it is bone formation. Bone formation means it's a osteotumor. It's a bone forming tumor. If you remember the WHO chart, benign and malignant, it has to be one of those. Calcification, like the picture that you see on the right. This is called intramedullary popcorn. This is the appearance that has been described, which is typically described in a chondrogenic tumor which has cartilage. The matrix may have a soft tissue compartment. It might component. So you might have a lytic lesion and you might have a breakthrough and a large soft tissue component. Again, occurs in malignancy. A ground glass or a radiolucent typically occurs in fibrous tissue. So you get it in fibrous dysplasia. So you can have an osteoid matrix, like you get in osteosarcomas, chondroid matrix, chondrosarcomas, and other chondroid tumors, myxoid, a ground glass, which occurs in fibrous tissues. So these are the 4 questions that any Kings asks, and if you're able to answer them, you know what you are dealing with. So once again, this is osteoid matrix. You can see that the distal femur is throwing bone. So that is, if you see on the lateral aspect of the destroyed femur sticking out of the normal femur, you can see bone formation. So this is a malignant bone forming tumor. So it has to be a osteosarcoma. Here you can see a lytic lesion. The middle picture is actually a proximal humerus expansile lytic lesion, and it's empty. There is nothing inside the tumor. It's just empty. Typically that you see a clear matrix, that is, which is seen in a bone cyst. Typically a simple bone cyst, you get a clear matrix. The one on the right, which is the proximal humerus, you can see dots of calcification. This is produced by a chondrogenic tumor, enchondromas, chondromyxoid fibromas, chondrosarcomas. These are all, you will see small dots of calcification. So these are the 3: osteoid, myxoid, or a clear, and a chondroid matrix. This is one of our patients only, very typical osteoid, total osteoid matrix, isn't it? The whole tumor is full of bone. So there is no differential diagnosis here. It is only a osteosarcoma. Another one, good one actually. You can see that it's a pure lytic lesion. There's a pathological fracture also. But when you look carefully, you find that there are small specks of calcification inside the lytic lesion. That is on the again, maybe on the where Dr. Gopal has marked it for you. So that you know that those calcification is a sign of a chondrogenic tumor. This is an enchondroma. Suppose it was not there, I could have called this even a giant cell tumor if there was no calcification. So this little dot of calcification now has given you a clue that you're dealing with a chondrogenic tumor. So this is an enchondroma with a pathological fracture. In fact, you can treat it by doing nothing. It will heal by its own. It's good to know that these diagnoses, isn't it? So typically, it doesn't stop with an X-ray in bone tumor. This is just for completion's sake. There are some tests that you routinely do, like to rule out multiple myeloma, serum electrophoresis, and a Benz-Jones, the M-band in the electrophoresis. Sometimes you do blood tests for prostate cancers, ESR, which is non-specific, alkaline phosphatase, which is typically increased in an osteosarcoma, and a non-malignant disease like Paget's. If the calcium and PTH are abnormal, you must think of parathyroidism. You do a mammogram and find out whether there are primary bone tumors. The CT, the mammogram, and the ultrasound tells you whether you're dealing with a secondary or primary. So they usually, if you are thinking the age group is right and you're thinking of secondaries, you have to do probably all of this to find out where the primary is. Remember that you have to do this test. If you're suspecting a secondary, you should not immediately run and biopsy it. You must try to non-invasively search for the primary. So many times when people say, let's do a biopsy, let's do a vertebral biopsy. And just before the biopsy, you get a serum electrophoresis report with an M-band. So here you've got a diagnosis even without a non-invasive testing, biopsy. So please do all these relevant non-invasive tests first. So after all these investigations, this is what we do is whether we want to find 2 types of whether the disease is within the bone or has spread out of the bone, which means localized or systemic. So locally, the CT scan is useful for finding out whether it's inside bone. It tells you, these are the benefits of it. It tells you about bony details, mineralization. It's a good diagnostic aid for benign bone tumors. It will delineate the cortex very well, Mineralization is seen very well. It's very useful in areas where X-rays are little iffy. For example, the spine or the pelvis where you have a lot of overlap. The benefits of a CT scan, the benefits of an MRI are you can get to see your soft tissue, your cortical breakthrough, your soft tissue extensions, skip lesions, marrow involvement, intramedullary spread is called a skip lesions, whether you can dissect the neurovascular bundle out in relation to the tumor. So an MRI is an extremely useful investigation for a bone tumor. It guides the extent of tumor. Remember, most of them are surgically treated by wide excisions, and the MRI tells you how much wide is wide. Typically, we take a 5 centimeter margin, so it tells you how much is 5 centimeter. The only catch to this is actually just to mention that sometimes you may mistake the edema due to the tumor as also the tumor, and we might resect more. So some people ask, why do you do a bone scan? It is routinely not done, but it is usually done when you have one lytic lesion and you're suspecting multiple lytic lesions. Metastasis is a classical diagnosis. Okay, it has good sensitivity, and poor specificity. It will tell you whether there are multiple lytic lesions, but you can't identify them. Then sometimes additionally of a CT to the local part, we also do a CT typically to the chest. For a bone tumor, it is chest to detect metastasis. After all this, you plan a biopsy. Remember that a biopsy is a very critical procedure. It's a surgical procedure. It has its principles, and it must be done after extreme preparation and planning. And if you go wrong here, 1 in 5 patients sometimes end up, it's very common in the place I work, that somebody else biopsies it and then sends it to us. And we find transverse biopsies, we find biopsies placed in the wrong compartment. We sometimes have biopsies which have entered the joint and taken the lesion. So it is best done in the place which deals with tumors routinely. So that's about 1 in 5 patients. The only reason for the amputation is not that the tumor has spread or it's a large tumor. It's because the primary incision for biopsy is wrongly marked and you can't excise them. So we have spoken about this. Don't biopsy it immediately. Make a thorough evaluation and then only biopsy. Okay. Typically, it's done after the MRI because otherwise the surgical procedure leaves a lot of edema and FARS. So you must collect a good sample. Talk to your pathologist. What is good? You must do it without spreading the tumor and without injuring vital structures. Go directly into the tumor. We know that biopsies are closed and open. Open is when you have to use a knife. Incisional is when the tumor is suspected to be benign. Excisional means you take a little bit of the tumor and send it for biopsy, which is in malignant. These are the biopsies you can do. Ask yourself is, plan the biopsy. Plan the biopsy looking at the CT, MRI, and clinically, which is the best part. If you have a soft tissue mass, that's the best part. If you have the junction between normal and abnormal bone, that's the best part. The worst part is the central necrotic area of a bone tumor. You will get only necrosis. There will be no cells there. So don't put your needle in the dead center simply because that is the biggest part of the tumor. And then choose your pathway. Make sure you are in a safe corridor. Again, we have already told that it is not a trivial surgery. Typically, as you would do for any other surgery, investigations, bleeding, blood, anticoagulants, diabetes, antibiotics, informed consent, and post-procedure. It requires everything, just like any other surgery. We have told about this. Okay, if it's purely bony, you might have to use a drill or create a window in the bone. So these are wrong biopsies. Okay, these are wrong biopsies. The transverse biopsy is a disaster. Is a disaster. Here, actually, you can see he has gone through the patellar tendon. Now, to excise this tumor, you have to excise the patellar tendon. Very difficult to reconstruct the extensor mechanism. The one on the end is the tumor is somewhere low in the knee, but the needle has entered normal tissue. So this tract right from the entry to the tumor is now contaminated. So you have to do a wider resection than what is planned. So these are wrong techniques of doing biopsies. Here is something where a drain has been used. So you just see the size of the biopsy lesion. It looks as if somebody has done a plating of the tibia. massive incision, huge contamination, and see where he's put the drain. So far away, so that everything between that lesion, that incision, and the drain site now is contaminated. You have to excise the drain site also now. So this is almost a guarantee for some amputation. These are all fatal things to do. Okay, so you must know if you want to put it. Sometimes people ask that question: should I put a tunica or should I not put a tunica? The thing is, you must try to control bleeding. You put, no harm, but don't exsanguinate. You don't put, no harm, but make sure that it doesn't ooze too much. Do you put a drain? If you want to put a drain, put it in line with the incision. Don't put it far away. So this is the right way. Directly straight. That little feathery mass is a supposition of the tumor. It is going directly the shortest pathway through a single muscle away from major nerves and vessels without missing the tumor, and you can't go through and then go behind the tumor. So you go somewhere in this. You always use image. If you use ultrasound, use CT guided to make sure you are in the right. Get it right the first time. That is what we say. Then we preserve the specimen, and this is an acronym which all of you must have heard. In fact, we heard it from our professors, and we keep teaching our students too. Always culture what you biopsy, and biopsy what you culture. A critical, fundamental clinical principle. So this is Henneking staging, which tells you whether the tumor is inside bone, outside bone, or distantly spread. You can always pick this up from textbooks. Henneking staging. So surgery is of 4 types. When you go inside a giant cell tumor and curettage, that's an example of a intralesional surgery, curettage. When you remove from a benign swelling with the margin, for example, let's say even an osteochondroma, when you resect, you're resecting through the margin of abnormal and normal bone. That's a marginal resection. A wide resection is typically reserved for a malignant tumor where you do a cuff of normal tissue. A radical resection may be either a whole compartment, but typically it means an amputation. There are 4 surgical margins of resection for musculoskeletal tumor: intralesional, marginal, wide, and radical. So these are just the surgeries. This is a limb salvage surgery. This is limb salvage with your amputation. Limb salvage means you're preserving the limb of the patient by either putting an endoprosthesis. This is something which we use very commonly. This is called extracorporeal irradiation. That is, you remove the bone with the tumor and then irradiate it and put it back. So that gives you a bone graft, which takes a long time to incorporate. ECIR is what it's called. So once you have the principle of surgery is whether you want to, treatment is actually whether you want to cure the patient. Metastasis, you do palliate. Okay. The summary slide. The most common symptom of a primary pain, which is essentially non-mechanical, pain at rest or night pain. Radiological features are suggestive but not diagnostic. For doing a definite diagnosis, you must do a biopsy. If the treatment is localized to the bone, you can cure the patient. That's called curative intent. But if it spreads, then you do a palliative intent. Thank you. I think that'll stop.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is one question. When do you want only CT scan and MRI can be avoided?
Typically, the benign inside tell you option. Similarly, when there are tumors located in the pelvis and the spine, again, the CT scan is a good location. When you have a malignant process, when you're thinking of malignancy, it's better actually, if you have a choice between the CT and MRI, it's always better to do a MRI. The bony lesions, the calcification will be better seen in the CT scan. But if you want one lesion, go for an MRI. That will give you most information.
All right, sir. There are no more questions in the chat box. I will request senior faculties for comments now. Gopa Kumar, sir.
Jagadish has given almost everything which the students needs to know regarding bone tumors. He started with, even though his topic was clinical evaluation, he dealt with clinical evaluation, then regarding radiology of bone tumors, the other investigations, then he said about the principles of biopsy, and precisely regarding examination. So he has covered almost everything. And common questions that are asked whenever you get a tumor is how to differentiate between benign and malignant tumor. He has mentioned 6 or 7 points how to differentiate between a benign and a malignant tumor. What will you ask in the history? What do you see on inspection? What will you find on palpation? All these he has mentioned. And other question, that is how to make the diagnosis. He said regarding the, apart from the history, the location of the tumor, in the bone, the site of the tumor in the skeleton. Then regarding all the other things, what you get on palpation and inspection of these bone tumors. Radiologically, the Ennekins 4 questions are very important. Where is the lesion? What is the tumor doing to the bone? The tumor, and what is inside the tumor? These first 4 questions. I think it was an excellent talk, and I think the students might have benefited. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kakatkar, sir.
I think Gopa Kumar sir has summarized it absolutely perfectly. That if you follow this particular method in coming to a diagnosis and analyzing the entire history and the findings, I think you can do a very good clinical assessment of any tumor. And the principles of treatment also you have, Jagdish, very beautifully you have explained. I think it was a very comprehensive and beautiful talk.
Thank you, sir. Mohanty, sir.
Yeah, really, Jagdish, it was an excellent lecture, and very basic level and self-explanatory. Whenever for students, whenever you get a tumor or any swelling, 3 things to give you the diagnosis: the age of the patient, the site of the tumor, and number 3, benign or malignant. There are 3 questions. And whenever you get a malignant tumor or so, then regarding management, first thing you tell, establish some diagnosis. Number 2, staging of the disease. Number 3, definitive treatment. That's how you approach a management of malignant tumor. These are the 3 things which usually, I tell to students whenever I take clinics and all. And he has really beautifully, he has enumerated all this, how to read the X-ray, how to do everything. These are if you just know this much, then we'll walk through a tumor case. There's no doubt about it. Thank you, Jagdish. It was a fantastic lecture.
Thank you, sir.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Actually, Jagdish sir has done job of next X-ray speaker very easy. Thank you for that. Patnaik, sir. Patnaik, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Anything?
excellent talk. Yes, sir. I want to say that it is very comprehensive, and it is basically an approach, a system which sir has told. So all students should understand that whenever you are given a case of a bone tumor, or you are asked to read on an X-ray or a sort of a histological specimen, it is the approach and the system in which we evaluate and assess a case And even Mohanty sir now told, so three very important points: the age of the patient, where is the site of the lesion, and whether clinically it can be a benign or a malignant lesion. This is all that is required. And when it comes to the next level, to the investigations and management, obviously we'll have to plan what is your diagnosis, then how do you stage your lesion, and what is your definitive management. And here again, Sir Jagdish sir has beautifully enumerated the principles of biopsy, the principles of how to handle a malignant bone tumor, and how to approach the benign any sort of a basic swelling also. He very beautifully, the way he described that localized swelling and a diffuse swelling of the shoulder, that is how it's a play of words. So all students should know, whatever you are telling to the examiner, it has to give a particular message. So overall, it is very, very nice, and it has been very educative for me also. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mahle sir, if you are there, please unmute yourself. Mahle sir. Sir has joined, but I don't know whether he is there. Uday Kumar sir.
Samantha sir is there.
Yes, I am just scrolling through the faculties. आप बताइए
Okay.
sir उनका.
Sir, okay. The first one comment, second one question, third one is addition. Sir, Jagdish sir.
First one, sir.
Sir, excellent talk, sir. As usual, your way of teaching is excellent. Very clear, just like a spoon feeding. The other day, I told Samantha sir also same thing. Suppose from the age, location, and what are all has been already repeated. So I don't think anybody can miss the clinical diagnosis. Of course, as you said, sometimes radiologist and pathologist also cannot come. The picture will be there. Sometimes you think it is absolutely benign, then it turns to be malignant. There are many occasions are there. There are many occasions. Even as a early part, one case of osteomyelitis, as osteosarcoma as osteomyelitis. I went inside 2 times. It happened to me because one senior when I went into did a biopsy, turned out to be Ewing sarcoma. So infection can mimic malignancy. Malignancy can mimic infection. That is the one statement everybody has to remember. The second one thing is my question to you, Jagdish sir, because you said after skeletal maturity, can we call it as epiphyseal tumor? Because you said I tell all my teaching is once a skeletal maturity, before skeletal maturity, we can call it epiphyseal tumor, metaphyseal, diaphyseal tumor. After the skeletal maturity, when the physis is closed, no more it is an epiphyseal, metaphyseal. What my way of teaching to students, I tell them, if you can tell upper end or shaft diaphyseal tumor or end tumors. Otherwise, you can tell tumor of the epiphyseal region or tumor of the metaphyseal region, tumor of the diaphyseal region. You just clarify this question to me, sir.
Let him answer, sir. Let him answer, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, please.
Sir, I will agree with you. It's again, as Naik sir said, it's more a play of words.
Yes, sir.
In a child, you can say epiphysis, whereas in adult, it is probably better to say epiphyseal region. Metaphysis, because theoretically, because the physis is closed, it is not truly an epiphysis, but it still remains an epiphyseal region. So I believe it's just a play of words.
Yes, sir.
But if you try to focus on the location, at least for a postgraduate, I believe you will get some clues to what the tumor is.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
That's what.
One more thing is, can you explain this cortical expansion, sir? Or shall I tell my view of expansion?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So many times I ask the students, you tell always expansed tumor, bone is a rigid structure, how will expand? So what I read in one of the textbooks, I believe it is in the Kirkpatrick Agartha radiology book, pathology, physiology, radiology book of orthopedics. It is there, it's given, once there is the destruction goes on, when the cortex eroded and destroys the bone, The periosteum tries to contain the bone, form a rim of bone around that. So it can contain the bone as long as it can contain. So that's how we get a expansed tumor in any expansed lesion. But once the epiphysis cannot contain, it breaks. That's how it goes in soft tissues. But in Ewing sarcoma, what you said already, this expansion occurs at stages. That's the reason why the periosteal newborn formation occurs in stages. That's why you see the onion peel appearance. Sir, another point I would like to add, in all osteosarcomas, there is one radiological finding which is very, very constant. The original ghost bone cortex is always intact. You can always see the ghost bone cortex intact. That cortical line is always preserved. I have seen innumerable number of osteosarcomas. You can always see, except in telangiectatic osteosarcoma, where everything is damaged, aggressive tumor. Otherwise, in all other tumors, osteosarcomas, one important finding, radial finding by the PGs, you can see always the ghost bone. The ghost bone is always intact. The ghost cortex, the original cortex. That's what my addition, sir. Your comment, sir.
Sir, I will totally agree. Totally agree with what you have said earlier also about cortical expansion. That little rim of bone, I don't, if you go back to the giant cell tumor photograph of the X-ray of the distal radius, that little line that you see is not the original cortex. It is actually tumor new bone. Original cortex has been eaten away by the tumor.
Yes,
and
sir. Yes,
exactly like Uday Kumar sir says, when you push periosteum, you will get bone out of it. So the expanding, that little rim in the edge of the tumor is very correctly, it is periosteal new bone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The other thing is regarding the osteosarcoma. I think diagnosis of bone tumors is a subspecialty by itself. Histologically, radiologically, even clinically, every day we get surprised. Every day we get surprised.
Yes,
and
yes, yes,
that is why we have this tumor board where the pathologist and the radiologist and the clinician sit together, because even the pathologist is not convinced what the tumor is. In an osteosarcoma, there is one clinching thing, and that is the presence of tumor osteoid, tumor new bone. So if you have tumor new bone on the X-ray, that is, if you see fluffs of osteoid, it is an osteosarcoma. If you see tumor new bone in the slide, the histopathologist sees tumor new bone, irrespective of whether there is a spindle cell or a giant cell or a fibrous cell or any other cell around. If you see tumor osteoid, then you are convinced it is a osteosarcoma. If you don't have tumor osteoid, then the whole problem, then you need tumor markers, immunocytochemistry and all other things.
Yes,
but the clinching thing is tumor osteoid, tumor new bone for an osteosarcoma.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I agree with sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Samantha, sir.
I was listening carefully because my knowledge in tumor is very, very poor. What was Jagdish was telling, I was just recapitulating. I was enriching my ideas. I have nothing to add on this. Jagdish, it was a nice one.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you, sir. Long time.
Thank you.
Kanujiya, sir.
I think everything has been said, and the way he has told, simplest way, systematic, comprehensive. One thing which is to be cultured to be biopsied, and biopsied to be cultured. About 20 years back, I had a child about 11 years back. He had swelling in the forearm, and after opening, I found a pus. But thinking that it is pus, but fortunately, I sent it for biopsy. It came to be rhabdomyosarcoma. So the sentence that everything to be biopsy is to be cultured and culture to be biopsy is very important.
Thank you, sir, for re-emphasizing the same point which was also emphasized by Jagdish, sir. Sir, there are 3-4 questions on chat box, sir. Sir, kindly.
So these are individual tumors descriptions. Clinically, these are not differentiated, I think. The rest of this thing would be covered by you, I think, in radiology.
All right, sir. But let their, at least we will tell them what actually they should read in that context. Sir, extracorporeal irradiation. that point, what do you mean by extracorporeal irradiation? I think the student must be asking in with respect to osteoid osteoma management procedure. Sir,
Sir,
please explain.
No, no.
yeah, sir, this is for
No, not that.
No, it is not like
For
that. It is not
osteoid
like
Sir,
osteoma.
radiation. Sorry, sir, radiation part.
for an osteoid radio frequency ablation, which
Yeah.
is NIDUS.
RFA.
Extra means outside, corporeal means body.
Body.
So extracorporeal is you resect the tumor and take it out, and then actually you radiate it like an atomic bomb. You give it a massive bout of radiation, everything will die, and then you re-implant this as a graft. So actually it is dead bone, but there is no question of fit because it's the patient's own bone. Typically, we do it in sclerotic bone lesions like osteosarcoma and all. If it is very lytic, like a giant cell or a telangiectatic, obviously it will get further weakened when you irradiate it. So this is extracorporeal irradiation. It's one of the ways to preserve the limb of the patient. So rather than an expensive tumor, sometimes typically we use it in what is called intercalary resection. Intercalary means there is good bone on top of the proximal to the tumor and good bone distal to the tumor. That middle segment, we will take it out, irradiate it. Nowadays, there is also liquid nitrogen, which is being done. I think Tata Memorial is a place which does it very often. You dip it in liquid nitrogen for 20 minutes, cryotherapy. Everything dies. You allow it to thaw, put it back, and you will be very surprised. We have some wonderful results where sometimes it's difficult to say whether the bone has been taken out, because the shape is identical, everything is same, and they're walking so beautifully. So in some selected cases, that is an option. Extracorporeal irradiation.
Basically, I think what Jagdish was telling, that mainly it is, suppose when you cannot replace that part of the thing with the normal bony tissue, whatever you take by is like a halo, because sometimes the extracorporeal radiation is more true for your pelvic tumors. Am I correct? I think Jagdish, you will agree on that.
Sir, it could be done there, yeah, but we tend to use it more in long bone only, sir, where it is diaphysia.
More diaphysia, even cryo is now done with the pedicle, that you do the cryo so that you can reattach the pedicle over there.
Yes, and that is one way of resecting. That is, you resect the tumor only proximally, make a cut either proximally and distally. Don't take it out of the body. You have a pedicle and then dip it. Very cumbersome. We have done a few. We have spilled some liquid nitrogen on ourselves and other people. So that doesn't, it's a tricky procedure.
Yeah, because you have to keep the pedicle intact on one side.
Exactly. It's a very fiddly procedure.
Kakatkar sir, in lieu of this extracorporeal irradiation where this facility is not available, any take out the tumor, bone tumor, do the autoclaving and use it.
Well, I think people in Tata Hospital, they have tried this. And we as trauma surgeons, we have done this in a couple of patients where we have got a bone piece brought by the patient from the accident site. We have autoclaved and we have put it in between the gap. And it is very surprising that in a couple of them, it survives and it gets incorporated beautifully well. So autoclaving also is one of the modalities which is used. And I have heard from Tata people that yes, they do it. One more point
regarding this tumor, that was regarding the bone which is infected. What is about regarding the tumor?
No, not infected. This is fresh bone from the accident site, which was used in a couple of patients.
The bone accident site, it was lying down, lying out of the body.
But then even in the tumors, this has been tried in Tata Hospital. I have heard it from the Tata people.
Now we have
by autoclaving, this cancer cell dies.
Yes.
Yes, it is a non-vitalized graft. Sir. It's
yes,
like a.
It is a non-vitalized graft.
It's structural graft scaffold only.
Yes, it is only structural scaffold. Another point about the biopsy, which now the oncosurgeons, ortho-oncosurgeons insist, is that if you have to do a biopsy, as Jagdish has told very precisely important points, how you should not cross the planes and how you should not damage the normal tissue or contaminate the normal tissue. So the oncosurgeons, they insist that ideally the biopsy should be done by the surgeon who is going to do the definitive treatment.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So he can plan it the way he is having the future plan in his mind, and that's probably the best way to do the biopsy.
Right, sir. And the incision of biopsy also should be the same
Excised.
incision. It should be coming in the same incision of the definitive surgery.
Yes, and it should be excised. That even track of biopsy has to be excised.
Sir.
That is why it should be done by the surgeon who is going to do the definitive procedure later on.
Yes. Right, sir. Sir, 2-3 questions are there. Though this will be covered in next class, I think we can take this. Sir, how to identify eosinophilic granuloma and adamantinoma radiologically?
There are two different ends of the spectrum. Eosinophilic granuloma is a small child. So you will never see an adamantinoma in such a small child. And the adamantinoma is a very peculiar, it's a very, very peculiar tumor which either will occur in the mandible or on the tibia, diaphysis of the tibia. There is actually no other site. There are, I mean, again, it is better to say no other site. So an adult with a diaphyseal slowly growing tumor, adult means a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, can have adamantinoma as a differential diagnosis. And eosinophilic granuloma is typically a child, single digit, 5, 4, 6, 7, 9, with a lytic lesion. So sometimes you have multiple lytic lesions and you have multiple eosinophilic granuloma, what is being called the Lederer-Sweeps disease. You can have multiple. That is sometimes treated by, it is treated as a malignancy. It's treated with chemotherapy. When you have
Thank you, sir.
widespread.
Right, sir. Sir, radiological differentiating point for chondromyxoid fibroma versus enchondroma.
Okay, I'll tell you the single most important point. An enchondroma, small bones of the hand and feet. A chondromyxofibroma, large bones, humerus, tibia, femur. One of the many differences.
Periarticular regions in long bones. And sir, now non-ossifying fibroma from fibrous dysplasia.
Okay, I will tell you one. Non-ossifying fibroma is a cortical lesion. Fibrous dysplasia is a medullary lesion.
Yes. So that was the reason actually, whenever this class will be taken in detail, confusion will occur. So one-liners very important. And I have felt that all these three questions, these one-liners are important. So non-ossifying fibroma and fibrous dysplasia for students, one is central, another is cortical one. Enchondromas, they are small bones, and chondromyxoid fibromas are the ends of the long bones, means periarticular region in the long bones. Eosinophilic granuloma in children, adamantinoma in adult, adamantinoma specifically tibia or mandible. I think these important points, they are more important points to be stressed and remembered in the examination. With this, I think we are really thankful to you, sir. And personally, I am thankful to you because you have lessened my much more, eased my next talk in a much more better way. Thank you, sir. I think
Gopal.
I'm so happy to see all of you. Gopal. It's like coming into the family again. So it's been a really good time. I missed all of you for these months.
To all faculties regarding this epiphyseal lesion in ossified physis, can we call it a subchondral lesion?
If it's very close to the articular surface, we'll call it subchondral.
No, but I think the best terminology, as Jagdish has said, that it is an epiphyseal region. Because whenever we are describing GCT, we always say that GCT is an epiphyseal tumor. So instead of saying epiphysis, if you don't want to make a commitment where the physis has already fused, you can say it is from an epiphyseal region. But the region remains the same.
Sir, I think in exam for a students, not to give a chance to sleeping examiner, best way is to use this terminology. Is epiphyseal region or epiphyseal in immature skeleton, diaphyseal region or diaphyseal. I think this is important to avoid the unwanted questions from the examiner to the students. Now, I think we have covered this topic, and in
Gopal sir, one question, one suggestion.
Come,
Please be
yeah.
if you are presenting radiology board, be prepared for so many questions.
Sir, I will not give you a chance because I will extend my class to such a limit. Kalra sir will tell me petrol is finished. Kalra sir will remind me petrol is finished. And
you are taking sir, you are taking so many clarification from the Jagdish sir. I am observing your class clarification you are taking. Not one line answers. But sir, be prepared, sir. Be prepared. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Uday Kumar sir, thank you very much for alerting me. So I have prepared now. I will give least chance of 4 questions. I will extend my talk till 8:50, 8:55. Thank
you. He's preparing the questions. He's preparing the questions.
Sir.
And your topic will go beyond the time, so no question. Like presenting a paper.
Sir, I have already prepared questions for Gopal sir next class.
Okay, sir.
I will not leak that questions to you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. मेरे लिए अच्छी बात है. अगर if I am not able to answer, I will just tell you, sir. आप please explain कर दो.
I will be ready, sir. I will be ready.
Okay,
preparing for 1 week. Don't worry, sir.
Sir,
don't send the question earlier.
No, sir. Paper will not be leaked. Especially Gopal sir will not be
like an interview. Already prepared questions and sent to the
TV interview.
Thank you very much, sir. I will request Mohanty sir again to have your concluding remarks, sir, and then finally with Gopal Kumar sir's concluding remarks, we will end today's class. Mohanty sir.
It was excellent discussion and excellent lecture. To all the students, that you just remember these points. Whatever he has told, just remember that thing. You don't have to. There are so many things are written in the books and all. Just remember these things. Even if in the exam, if you are not able to give a proper diagnosis of a particular tumor, you can just tell it's a malignant tumor or it's a benign tumor. Then also it is good enough. But you have to tell either a benign or malignant, you're supposed to differentiate that clinically at least. You may not do a tissue differentiation. Radiologically, you can do the differentiation, but whatever clinically, you must tell that's a benign tumor or malignant tumor. In malignant tumor, again, you may not tell, suppose osteosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, if you're not able to differentiate according to age-wise, you can tell that. Site-wise, you can tell that. But even if you're not telling, tell at least a malignant tumor. So otherwise, it was an excellent learning opportunity for all the students as well as the faculty. I thank Jagdish for an excellent lecture.
Thank you, sir.
Even I have heard, lectures have been given by people from Tata after my colleague. They make it very complicated. Actually, it was so simple and simple way to remember classification, the management, NAKing classification. There are a couple of things you must know as a postgraduate, as a MS, examining. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Most appreciating part is the most heart-touching slide is the surgical sieve. What is that, Jagdish sir? Surgical sieve. Okay.
Chalni, sir. Chalni.
So Jalni, we call it filter. We call it Jallida. In Telugu, we call it Jallida.
Right, sir.
Mahanti sir. Mahanti Telugu sir. Yes, sir. Sir knows Telugu. Mahanti sir.
No, I don't know.
Thank you, sir. Gopal Kumar sir. My request personally to you, sir, please, in short, in which way we should go for tumor part? Your comment, sir. Gopal Kumar,
yes, it was an excellent class. Even though the topic was clinical evaluation, he started with biopsy. Then he went to the history, how to clinically distinguish between benign and malignant tumors. Then he said regarding the benign aggressive tumors. Then finally, how to make a clinical diagnosis depending upon the age group the site of the tumor and the consistency and other things. Then apart from that, he went to the radiological evaluation and he made it very simple by how to answer the 4 questions that are put forward, that is given by Nikhil. And from that, you will be able to make a probable diagnosis. He mentioned regarding the other investigations like role of CT, MRI, and bone scan. Probably he has not mentioned PET scan, that you may be doing it next week. Then he said regarding the role of biopsy, how important biopsy is, how a wrong biopsy can lead to amputation. And then after that, he said regarding the basics of this, what do you call, excision of these tumors, whether it is that is intralesional, marginal, wide, and radical resection. And he has gone through everything that is needed for the students. He also has said a few points regarding the final treatment, what is neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and chondrosarcoma needs surgery, not chemotherapy. All these points he has mentioned. He has mentioned also regarding the extracorporeal radiation that is practiced by many surgeons nowadays. So it was a very comprehensive talk where he mentioned everything regarding the bone tumors. Probably in the next, the students, I request you to read this topic and come prepare for the next talk, because with these 2 talks, you will be thorough with the topic of bone tumors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think with Kakatkar sir's permission, sir, shall we call off the day? Kakatkar sir.
I think sir is frozen.